a little bit more on just how the social networkers are having such an impact right now. John.
Well, this becomes, the news feed, which is obviously what Facebook describes as one of their key features, but for everybody it becomes this lifeline in a situation like this, Trish. And in speaking to people who do significant analytics on what's coming through on Twitter, what you initially saw today was obviously some local news coverage, and a lot of that getting shared in various ways. Then the national media coverage, which was shared in a big way. But it's felt like, at least over the last couple of hours, that it just becomes this place for connecting with people, with loved ones, especially when you think of monitoring people that are in a race like the Boston Marathon. You have a set destination, website where you can track how someone's doing, but you generally don't get that much information. And so that's really, and you guys have been talking about it, that's what you've seen play out over the last couple of hours, this being one of the key places for people to connect. And then, of course, on top of that, you've heard so many stories about people having some challenges with their cell phone connections as well, and that becomes sort of the tool by which the people on the ground are communicating too. So it does become complicated, but those seem to be sort of the three tracks of where social media has gone today, leaning on what the local news reporting was, and that getting fed out in a big way through the various social media channels, then the national coverage, which obviously continues via the media, but more than anything, just being able to pinpoint where people are, and obviously with the authorities suggesting just stay in a safe spot, stay in that hotel room or whatever. That does help for people on social media to better connect too, when people are focused more on their phone as opposed to navigating through the streets.
John makes a really good point. The social media not only changed the way we get information when something like this breaks, it changed the way law enforcement and intelligence investigate incidents like this.
So do they have people right now that are doing nothing but watching Twitter feeds?
Oh, yeah.
They do.
Watching,
oh, yeah.
and this is a dedicated stream of
They do.
information.
It's hard to deal with because there's so much of it, but they do. In NYPD they do. The Boston Police, it may be small, but they'll have it. And whoever did this, it stands to reason will have a social media presence. And so now one of the very first things you do if someone becomes a suspect is you check out their social media environment before you even talk to them. And you'll do that in some cases before you even get to the door.
And what specifically would investigators be looking for on social media?
Statements of intent, mindset, what the sort of things they're thinking about, location. Nice thing about Twitter and Facebook posts now is they're often geolocated. So someone may be, you could figure out fairly quickly, are they posting from their Twitter in Los Angeles or in Boston? If they're in Boston, it's now a plausible subject. There's a wealth of information there. And perpetrators often, they're not like Ted Kaczynski was, which was truly a hermit living in a cabin in the woods somewhere. They have, just like everyone else, a virtual life and a virtual self out there that will then be used against them in part of this investigation.
If this was a terror attack from abroad, from a Middle Eastern terror group like Al-Qaeda, would they typically want to take responsibility pretty soon thereafter? I mean, might we see some kind of statement from someone?
It depends.
If they were responsible?
It depends. They may want to, if it's an active plot and it's not over, they may want to wait because they hope that the perpetrators will get away or be able to act again. And so there's no point in moving out soon. And it also depends what motivated them and who it is.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the timing. You say act again. I mean, the first two explosions going off shortly before 3 o'clock. And then the second one, roughly 4 miles away at the JFK Library, happening maybe about 50 minutes or so ago now. I mean, those were spaced apart. What might lead authorities to think that there could be additional threats?
The fact that they have not yet apprehended someone they believe to have been the perpetrator and gotten to the bottom of it.
Or they
so
simply haven't told us.
Yeah, well, I mean, if they had it, so if someone did this, and if they don't have the person who did it in custody, then it stands to reason they can act again. And until they have the person in custody, they're not going to rest easily.
But that's assuming it's a single person. I mean, if they were to get one in custody, there could theoretically be others that they're concerned about. The fact that they're shutting down cell phone service in Boston, that in and of itself, I imagine, is a bit of a red flag.
They at this point, they have no confidence that the incidents are over. I mean, that is still a possibility. You've got the marathon and JFK, but it may also go beyond the JFK library. It may go beyond Boston. I mean, there may be an incident here. There may be in an outlying city, in Harvard Square. I mean, who knows where it will be if that happens.
In previous examples like this, situations you yourself have had to deal with in your career, how long typically is the delay between when an event occurs and some entity claims some sort of responsibility?
It usually is fairly quick when it happens, and whoever does it immediately, usually not the one who actually did it. It's just someone with an agenda who wants some attention.
And by quick, do you mean within an hour or within a half a day? It's now been over 2.5 hours, which is why I asked.
Yeah, it would be within hours. Or whether it's the first hour, I don't know. But this is mischievous. I mean, it may be someone abroad working through proxy servers. It's hazardous. You claim credit for this, and we figure out who you are. The feds will be coming.
There are any number of news items out now, and as Richard was mentioning, the digital media can be frightening. Everything from Jaromir Jagr, who just joined the Boston Bruins, deleting a tweet from earlier because he wasn't aware of how serious the events were. The runners have a runner's location now, usually set up right where these explosions occurred. They've moved that out of Boston towards Brookline, a wealthy suburb just out from Boston, at about Coolidge Corner, for those that know that. And also there are some substantially argued reports by the New York Post of someone being apprehended at one of the hospitals who has burns. And the Boston police right now strongly disagreeing with that. I know Brett Baer was just out on Twitter on this, but there seem to be conflicting reports away from the actual news that could come out.
To your point, Richard Falkenrath, you really do have to focus on what you're directly hearing from the Boston Police Department, the FBI, and other credible sources.
Yeah, and it comes to really the quality of the journalism and to what extent you are just relaying on some fact that someone told you, or you're double checking it. And particularly the identification of a perpetrator, his or her location in a certain spot, possibly nationality. These are potentially incendiary and very problematic concepts to get out there. And it's the sort of thing, if wrong, has consequences, and if right, has consequences.
Is digital media the friend or challenge of law enforcement officials?
Both. And I'm not sure which way it breaks. It varies a little bit from case to case. For really high-profile, major investigations against criminal syndicates or international terrorist organizations, incredibly, electronic surveillance is our most powerful instrument. So it turns out to be very, very powerful force for the government. But for lower forms of violation and criminality, it usually is the other way, just because local law enforcement don't have the resources to tap into it and mine it to the same level.